This is the Clutch Picks Sports Betting Podcast. My name is Sheldon Alexander. Welcome to this week's episode as we count down to Conference Championship weekend in the NFL. Yes, we've done 22 episodes of this pod. We've made it through, and you know what? So far through the playoffs, I am just sitting and splitting everything. 2-2 week last week, bringing the season totals to 141, 134, and 7. Of course, we will break it all down with my guy, the man, the myth, the legend, that is Mr. Matt Russell. I know you had an eventful playoffs so far, an eventful, not only wild card weekend, but divisional round weekend as well. How are you as we head into the conference championships, my dude?
It's the combination of we need more games to keep the heater on, on the tracks here, but we also need to get out of the season as fast as we possibly can before the inevitable, as you like to say, the wave might turn. We talked last week about wild card weekend being, you never know where the money's coming from when it comes to, betting, and we just hit all these, long shot touchdowns, and that was kind of the strength of wild card weekend. Well, last weekend hit a few more long shot touchdowns and swept the board ATS 4-0 against the spread last weekend. So a little mix and match of being profitable on player props, anytime touchdowns, and of course, a 4-0 sweep, which is going to help the ledger when there's only 13 games in the postseason. So we got 3 of these things left. We have to dive in a little bit deeper. There's going to be more props available. There are going to be, I guess, not more anytime touchdowns, but certainly more props for each game. And then we're going to get, of course, dialed in for the Super Bowl, where it's props, and more props. So I think we're at a point in the playoffs here where we've made enough money that we can kind of at least say that we're pretty much guaranteed to be profitable no matter what happens going forward. But there's no reason to try to give some of this stuff back, right?
No, we want winners.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want winners? Winners will be coming. And I know normally we will start the pod by doing the games chronologically, but I think I want to go the other way around just because, I think I'll save the Chiefs matchup because it's the bigger matchup to discuss a little later on, if that makes sense.
Sure.
For no rhyme or reason, suspense will build up to the big game. The bigger game, I should say, because I don't want to disrespect the Lions. The Lions have been doing their thing. They're here, but I think we know which side I'm going to be on here, but we will still discuss. Lions at the Niners. Niners at home and favored by 7 points in this one. As mentioned, I am on the San Francisco 49ers. I will lay the 7 points. I don't like laying the 7 points. I'll start there, right? That's a lot of points to be laying in the playoffs, especially after watching the San Francisco 49ers escape last week, because that was an escape.
That was an escapade,
Yeah. The biggest thing here is I am constantly checking the weather report to see if there is rain involved at any point, because one thing that has been broken down by every Niners reporter, supporter, and everyone in between is rain, Brock Purdy's hand size, and can he grip the ball in the rain? Because if that happens, it's an automatic fade next year. We have to write that down because we witnessed it happen last week.
Yeah.
Also, though, I would like to say, I'm pleading to my guy, Mr. Shanahan here, okay? When there's weather, when Debo is out, and your quarterback can't even throw screen passes with confidence, how about you use Christian McCaffrey more than 17 times? Yeah. I'm just saying, I'm just tossing that out there as an idea, a concept, shall we say. A concept, shall we say. But either way, all that to say, as we head into this week, I'm laying the 7 points with the Niners because I just think as much as the Lions are a great story, the Lions, I think, are a really good team. They are here. They are ready. But I feel like they've won. They've already won. This is a great season for the Lions. They made the conference championship. Yes, they will put up a fight. I really do think so. But I think the Niners getting the scare last week, they'll be scared straight, so to speak, and they'll be ready for this game. I'm laying the 7 points with the Niners, and I know that I will be on my own because the majority of the world will be on the Lions and want to see the Lions win. It's a feel-good story. I get it. But also, they got some oomph behind them.
Yeah, listen, at this point, we can. I'll put it this way: I feel like we can use the whole they're playing with house money, or they've already considered the season a win thing. For teams like the Texans last week, where it's like, yeah, you won a playoff game, you get to the divisional round. Once you get one step away from the Super Bowl, like these are legit teams. And listen, if you're a 49ers fan, which you are, I think this is kind of one or the first of many here against the Detroit Lions. And honestly, if you really think about it, the NFC North entirely, because I think, 8 months from now, we're going to be talking about the NFC North in its entirety and going like, man, that division is going to be a problem for the rest of the league. Whereas I think, listen, this is stuff for next season, so don't let me get bogged down here. Whereas I think, the Philadelphia Eagles are, headed for some problems here going forward. And, I don't expect, no matter who gets hired as the various head coaches in the NFC South, it's going to be and much of a turnaround for any of those teams, right? So the Lions right now kind of have this one step ahead in the NFC North, where you've got Minnesota and Chicago, who I think are fully capable going forward of being problematic. So this, to me, looks like a game that might be sort of the first of a trilogy, sort of 3, 4, 5 years from now. So this isn't like, okay, the fluky Lions, whatever, right? Like, the culture change in Detroit has been well documented. NBC has done a nice job in the last couple of weeks of talking about not just obviously Dan Campbell, but the general manager, the ownership differences, et cetera, et cetera. So, this Lions team under Dan Campbell, who at this point, like, talking about purely head coaches, and I'm kind of, one of my sort of off-season things is going to be kind of rethinking the way that I think of head coaches, especially as a quarter of the league changes their head coach. And we just see the Chargers, add, former 49ers coach Jim Harbaugh. It's like, what does a head coach truly mean with regards to the day-to-day and the game-to-game?
Culture setter, man.
Yeah, culture setter and like high-level decision maker as far as, managing the game is concerned. And honestly, I think Dan Campbell is a better head coach than Kyle Shanahan. I do. And, it's funny. You'd laugh at it because it's like, wait, what? But it's like, he's not a better coordinator. He's not a better offensive coordinator. He's probably
I know what you're saying.
If you were in a sort of a weird universe where Kyle Shanahan could only be a defensive coordinator, Kyle Shanahan is probably a better defensive coordinator than Dan Campbell would be. It's why I always sort of talk about like coordinators, and why this stuff matters. And it's why we're going to put an even bigger emphasis in it in the offseason and leading up to next season into who are the coordinators of each team, because those are the guys who are moving the chess pieces around. But when it comes to like actual decision making, going for it on fourth down, trick plays, having your team ready, for trick plays, et cetera, right? Like, it honestly is the reason why Andy Reid managed to beat Sean McDermott last week. And it's honestly the reason why Kyle Shanahan almost lost that game last week to the Green Bay Packers. And so I don't know that I have the better head coach here if I'm taking the 49ers, minus the 7 points. But that's sort of the bigger picture thing. The sort of smaller thing is like, okay, let's dig into the market, what the number was supposed to be, why the number is, what it is. If you think about it this way, in the middle of the season, or sort of to the latter part of the season, where as we talked about on a weekly basis, the 49ers were being rated historically great, right? We talk about our, we always do our numbers out of 100. We sort of talk about the 80 being kind of like this threshold that if you go past 80 out of 100, you are then sort of a historically great team, a team to be, not to be trifled with. And the 49ers are rated that high. Once they became rated that high, I believe that game was it might have been the Thanksgiving game against Seattle, or at least going into that game. Once they got rated that high, they were 2-3 against the spread the rest of the way outside. And that's not even including the week 18 game, which was obviously a fake game, right? Mm-hmm. They'd be 2-4 if we included that, but 2-3 the rest of the way, which just shows like, it's really hard to kind of measure up to being like historically great, or sort of considered from a perception standpoint to be historically great. And so if this point spread existed in that time, the number would be higher than 7. It'd be 8. I mean, think about it this way. They were like, 14 and a half point favorites to like Seattle, which like Seattle isn't that far off from Detroit from a rating perspective. Now, Detroit goes and they cover all these games, and listen, maybe coulda, shoulda, woulda covered the wild card game, but certainly covered last week, though that got a little bit dicey. And you go, okay, San Francisco has to come down, which is why they're not, -8. They come down to -7 based on just kind of rating alone. But then you have obviously the Deebo Samuel question mark here, right? And like, how much does he matter to the point spread one way or another? And then you have the Lions sort of question mark where you go, all right, we've seen the Lions play a lot of indoor games recently, and now they go outdoors. And, you mentioned the Brock Purdy, weather situation. It's like, have we heard this before where you want to sort of be on the ball when it comes to weather conditions for a quarterback? Oh, yes, I believe we have. And that gentleman's name is Jared Goff, right? And so you kind of have these two quarterbacks here. You're like, I don't really want it to be rainy or windy or anything like that. And so you go over to our, friends over at AccuWeather.com, and you go and you check in the forecast for Santa Clara on Sunday. And what does it say? Great day for a football game, like perfect weather for a football game. And you just go, okay, good, because it shouldn't come down to sketchy weather for Brock Purdy. It shouldn't come down to sketchy weather for Jared Goff either. Mm-hmm. So I look at this from a point spread standpoint, and I think 7 is kind of the right number for right now. I'll be interested to see, listen, we're not going to get any news on Deebo Samuel until basically Sunday, right? Like, one, there's no reason for the 49ers to even tell us that like he's going to play. There's obviously enough, good enough reason to list him at questionable at, sort of the very most obvious, standard that you'd set, given the fact that he missed the end of that game. So you go, okay, we need to handicap this game with Deebo Samuel, and we need to handicap this game without Deebo Samuel. We have to do it relative to a key number, right? We're on 7 right now. And so, there's one thing being like, okay, this has to move a half a point because of this, or the rating for this team goes up because of that. But when you're coming on or off 7, like that's a really big move. 3 is the biggest move, of course, on or off of -3 from a key number standpoint. But 7 is right there as well, especially when we get into like the new overtime rules where you're going to be kicking extra points if you score first because the other team gets the ball, at least once. So all of a sudden, 6.5 and 6 doesn't really mean as much when you don't, because you're not, you have to worry about that extra point. So 7 is a really key number, and I think it's a pretty solid number. I'll be interested to see if Deebo Samuel gets ruled out for this game. Do we come back off of 7 and go to 6.5? Because earlier when this line was open, we were toggling between 6.5 and 7, meaning that if you wanted San Francisco -6.5, you had to pay -115, -120. If you wanted the Lions at +7, you had to pay -115 or -120. Right? It's kind of like the Chiefs and the Bills last week with -3. And then over the course of the week, even though Deebo Samuel hasn't looked particularly any more closer to being healthy for this game, the line has ticked up where we are at a flat 7 right now. So you don't have to worry about that. In fact, you actually are getting a bit of a discount on taking -7, meaning we are getting closer and closer to 7.5. And so if Deebo Samuel is ruled in for this game, I think we're going to get to 7.5. Mm-hmm. And if he's ruled out, I could see it going back to 6.5 if it comes off of 7 at all. So, you have to sort of go, okay, how much does Deebo Samuel necessarily matter? Obviously, when you're watching that game last week, on the surface, you go, okay, like the plays just aren't the same, right? Like the 49ers become a more basic offense. They're a basic offense with really good players.
Yeah.
Right? Don't get me wrong. But they don't have the same like danger element of the screen pass to Deebo.
1,000%. Yeah.
Or the end around to Deebo. Or even just like down by the goal line, him coming running across there, ready to take a flip from Purdy and just run over some corner.
I think too, though, like a big thing for me with the Niners and especially Shanahan, and I think this is part of the Shanahan haters why they dislike him or think he's overrated, is because there's a lack of adjustment. So I think like watching that game, it's like he came in with a game plan. This is the Deebo game, right? Like where we're feeding Deebo and then Deebo's out and he doesn't know what to do. Like he doesn't have the like counters to be like, okay, well, wait, do I just put someone else in Deebo's spot and fill him in and give him the screen passes, which we did see some weird like in and arounds to
you get Juwan Jennings and Ray McLeod in your life
and some Ray McLeod action that was like, come on, man, what are we doing here? Right. But what I'm saying is like coming into the game knowing that Deebo is banged up or whatever, does that allow Shanahan to just come in with the game plan of, all right, we're gonna go Kittle, we're gonna go McCaffrey, and I wonder if Deebo, even if he's hurt, is he able to play decoy and play, but not like, we're not running the A1 Debo plays.
Yeah.
Right. Or I saw Ocho Cinco say, and I thought this was interesting. He's like, I think Debo also needs to start making some business decisions. Like, you don't have to run over 3 guys on every screen pass. And it's like, that's not it's what he does though. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
which is
that's
easy to
literally
say
what
when
he
you're
does.
Ocho Cinco, who had zero interest in body contact of any kind.
He was all business decisions. Right?
Yeah, his entire life's been a business decision, right down to changing his name to Ocho Cinco.
Exactly.
And have us like a decade later referring to him as Ocho Cinco.
Still.
So
good.
So going into this game, like, you know, I wouldn't make a bet just yet. There's no real reason to make a bet when it just sort of
you want to know what Debo's saying.
-7. You want to know what that is, but you also want to be prepared for what you want to do if he's in or if he's out, right?
Correct.
And so you have to look and you go, okay, well, like, we kind of know what the deal is with when he's in. So what's the deal when he is out? And so you can look back at this season, and obviously the big sort of red gash on the 49ers record here, literal, is when he was out with those 3 losses in a row. And you go, okay, like, they are, you know, I think they're 0-4 when he is like missed time this season against the spread. And I think last week, I was going to say yesterday, feels like yesterday, last week's game was their one victory, right? Because they lost all 3 of those games during the season when he was out. And so that's very easy, but it's also a very sort of short-term, small sample size type of a deal. And
they were missing Trent during some of those games.
And missing Trent Williams, and Christian McCaffrey was injured, you know, in the Browns game too. And obviously, like, Browns defense at home in, you know, blustery conditions. Like, that's what we mean by small sample size, where, like, you can punch holes in 3 games, whereas you can't really punch holes in, say, 30 games. I mean, you can probably still punch holes in 30 games, to be honest. But, you know, he missed time last year as well. And you can go back and look at last year's results, and it's green, W's, right? And a bunch of covers as well. And you can go through and look at their, you know, points per game, and you can go through and you can look at their yards per play in those games. And so outside of the Cleveland game and last week, the yards per play has been basically like high 6s, low 7s, which is very good, right? That would like lead the league essentially if they maintain that pace, right? So the 49ers offense doesn't really take a hit when Debo's not in the game, unless it's Cleveland's defense at home and Christian McCaffrey's out and you've got conditions, or the conditions that were last week. And so, you know, we're looking at this game going like, oh, my bet is going to ride on whether Debo plays or not, because the offense wasn't exactly like locked in and clicking last week, while potentially forgetting that part of that had to do with the fact that Brock Purdy, frankly, right up until the last drive, like, people going a little nuts about the last drive, because for whatever reason, Brock Purdy is a lightning rod where he either has to be the MVP of the league or a terrible quarterback in the reality.
No in between.
Yeah, and the reality is, like most things in life, he's probably Jared Goff. You know what I mean? He's probably somewhere in between. And some people might think that's a compliment to say that he's like Jared Goff, and some people might take that as an insult, which is the funniest thing about like NFL, you know, the diatribes in the NFL, right? Where it's like, okay, some people think this and some people think that, and you're like, okay, fine, you guys are all, you know, lost your mind. It's always somewhere in between. So to me, it's less about like what version of Brock Purdy are we going to get, because if the 49ers, like you mentioned, with the game plan and having seen, you know, going beyond this past season when Debo was out, and with all the talent that they have, and the matchup being a pretty soft Detroit Lions secondary and pass defense, it's like, is Brock Purdy going to be better this week? And to me, the answer to that is like, yeah, I kind of think he is. And so I kind of, if I'm looking to back the 49ers, I would be hoping that Debo gets ruled out, as long as that comes with a line drop to 6.5, and you can get that -6.5. On the flip side, as we sort of creep upwards to the point where we're almost at 7.5 right now, and you can, you know, if you have a, you know, I'm not going to start naming off sort of third-tier sports books that have them available at +7.5 with some juice. But like, if we get to a point with 7.5, and say it's Debo is in, and we get to 7.5, which, given the sort of trend here, I would like the Lions at +7.5, because like, I kind of think I already know what I'm going to get from the 49ers, which is conservative decision-making, a desire to just win the game, a desire to keep a game close, which is, you know, a fear of the other team, which is at the end of the first half last week. And the 49ers on 3rd and 2 running 40 seconds off of the clock on 3rd and 2 is just it's less about like, oh, I don't trust this or that, because honestly, you just hand the ball to Christian McCaffrey 2 times and you're probably going to get it, at least if not the first time, you're probably going to get it the second time. So it isn't even so much a trust of Brock Purdy. And that's the problem, as you know, like over the years with Shanahan. It isn't, and that's the thing, like you mentioned haters, whatever. There's no haters and lovers or whatever. It's just like we're all sitting here as objective third parties or people who bet on or against. And in this case, I was both, having bet against the 49ers from a point spread perspective, but holding a 49ers to win the Super Bowl perspective. I couldn't be more down the middle as far as like wanting the 49ers to win, but not win by that many. And that's the point. I don't ever want to bet the 49ers to win by that many, because I know their coach is going to turtle in these circumstances. He is, think about it. Maybe that's at the end of the game where they have a 3-point lead. They're going to just, burn clock and do the conservative thing. And so, like, if we get to 7.5 with Debo, and God, if it goes without Debo, because I'm not saying that Debo doesn't matter. I'm just saying that if you're going to move off of a key number like this, you're going to want to be on the opposite side of that move. And so if he's in this game or he's not in this game and this goes to 7.5, if he's in it and it goes to 8, now we're back to the projection that I mentioned from the middle of the season, which projects the 49ers as a historically great team. And again, they're against the spread record with that label on them has not been very good. So essentially it's like whatever comes of this line and it goes off of 7, just take the other side so that you're capturing 7. What the bet that I'm going to recommend before the game starts, and you can make this as soon as you hear it, presumably because it is held steady throughout the week, is on the total. The total is 50.5. It's the same exact total that it was last week against the Packers. And you'll say, well, Matt, like the total went under and, seemed like a pretty cold under at halftime. Obviously, things got a little loose in that third quarter. We got to a point where essentially, listen, call me crazy. I think if Anders Carlson makes that, I think it's Anders Carlson. I always get the Carlson brothers mixed up. If Carlson makes that 41-yard field goal to go up 7, like I still think the 49ers score a touchdown, right, to tie that game. And now we're tied at 24 and we're going to overtime and we're going to go over the total of 50.5. And think about all the stuff that had to happen for that number to stay, for that total to stay under. The field goal, for one, being missed, but like rain deluge situation, quarterback, trying a glove on, not trying a glove on, obviously super, cowardly decision making at the end of the second quarter to not be able to get any points out of a drive that seemed headed for, honestly, at least a touchdown at the time. And honestly, just like, obviously a 49ers, a Packers team getting down close to the end zone in the first half multiple times and having to kick field goals over and over and over again.
Yeah.
If we take all of that circumstance that, again, was so close to going over, and we shift that to next weather, so you get better Brock Purdy, right? Potentially Debo maybe plays, maybe doesn't. But the two best teams at converting red zone appearances into touchdowns, literally the Lions and 49ers are 1 and 2 this season. Yeah. So you're not going to have that same Packers issue where, as much as like the Packers are fun, outside of Aaron Jones, like everybody else is really young. You get tighter in the red zone as far as coverage and stuff is concerned. You don't have a guy that you necessarily like are convinced is going to score. The 49ers or the Packers, I keep saying 49ers. The Packers got their touchdowns kind of from longer distance type of plays, or mega short yardage, right? Like once it got like 1st and goal from the 10, it was like things got super tight for the Packers. The Lions are different. The Lions are different from a conversion standpoint in the red zone. They're also different from an aggression standpoint. You don't need both to be going for it on 4th down and trying like fake punts and all this kind of stuff. You just need one of them to get a little loose. And that doesn't mean failures all the time. Sometimes that means extending drives, getting big plays out of a fake punt or a 4th down conversion, et cetera, et cetera. I think the game is going to be at the very least similarly efficient from an offensive perspective, only you're going to get better offensive efficiency near the red zone, near the goal line, and you're going to get more aggressive play. And if maybe that aggressive play or the lack of aggression that everybody's, obviously rightly so, ripping Kyle Shanahan for last week, maybe if he gets 5% more aggressive, because he's, because he sees Dan Campbell on the other side of the field, because he doesn't have to worry about Brock Purdy changing his glove in and out.
Yeah.
Because maybe he has Deebo Samuel, maybe he doesn't. I think there's going to be a lot of scoring in this game.
Definitely.
right? 50.5 being the same total as it was last week for the Packers, with, to me, a more efficient offense in the Lions, especially when it comes to converting, touchdowns and having a more aggressive sort of style of play. Like, I think that bodes well for the same level of, sort of ball movement or, sort of yardage gaining that the Packers and 49ers had last week, at the very least, because, by the way, it's also going to be way, way better weather conditions for such movement, right? So even if Debo doesn't play, Jawan Jennings is going to be a little bit better. Ray McLeod plays are going to work a little bit better. Because, again, the Packers defense, as much as they fired Joe Barry the very next day, I still think that's probably a better group defensively, at least in the secondary, than the Lions have. And honestly, what if Brock Purdy throws that interception to
changes everything.
Savage, right? Like, that blows the game up a little bit further too, right? Especially if it, listen, the guy had a pick six the week before. He knows how to run with the football. If he runs that back and now all of a sudden the 49ers are down 2 scores in that game, like, I think we go over there, because I think that just out of, like, having to, Shanahan gets more aggressive. So I kind of think he's forced into being more aggressive in this game. And so if you're going to give me the same total projection here, like a 27-24, a 31-24 type of game, like, I think at the very least, because again, even if Debo doesn't play, if we go back and we look at the yards per play numbers for the 49ers, like, it's still pretty good. And even without him last week in the rain with a pretty bad Brock Purdy, they still scored, 27, 24 points or whatever it was, right? Like, I think the 49ers can get to 30, but I also think the Lions can make a run at 30 points as well. So, I'm not that strong, certainly on the side, especially with it sitting here on 7. I obviously just gave you my take about what to do if and when it moves. But to me, the bet to make right now, because I think things can only kind of go up from here, if you know what I mean, from a total perspective, I think the bet here is taking the number here over 50.5 total points.
Yeah, no, to me, I totally with you there. Totally understand. And I think too, the biggest thing is whatever's going on with Debo, like, Shanahan's game planning for that. Like, he knows right now whether Debo's in, or the likelihood of Debo, or even if Debo's playing, right? Like, if Debo's playing and he's banged up, he's game planning that accordingly, right? Like,
they are running the plays without him right now, right?
Yeah,
like
there's no surprise, right?
Yeah.
There's no surprise for Shanahan as he builds the game plan this week. But as you mentioned too, I'll pick up on what you said. I think you will see a better Brock Purdy. You will see more of him taking deep shots because he's more confident with, gripping the ball, throwing the ball without the rain. So you will see those Ayuk plays, that you didn't really see last week against Green Bay. I do think as well, the big thing for me will be on defense. And I'm talking about the Niners being able to try to cover spreads. And one of the reasons why over the years, when I've thought about taking the Niners or have taken the Niners to cover bigger numbers, it's mostly based on their defense, right? Because their defense will get stops. I've said this all year, so this is not like brand new. I don't really like this defense as much as the defenses of the past. And Steve Wilkes, we know it's been kind of up and down, and they had the whole thing midseason where they're like, we got to bring them out of the booth and have them on the sidelines and all this stuff. And really, for me, it's more so like, when are you blitzing? When are you not blitzing? The pass rush, Chase Young hasn't done much really since he's come over.
It's so funny that, like, people were like, oh, I can't believe the Bears gave up so much more for Sweat than 49ers gave up for Young. It's like, well, Sweat's good.
Yeah.
And Young isn't.
Yeah.
So let's start there.
Yeah. So that part's going to be really interesting to see what the Niners defense in front will be able to do to your man's Jared Goff and company. Cause I just think, the Niners defense has that ability. And if the pass rush struggled because of the weather, because we obviously know, your pass rush is going to struggle if you can't, run properly or cut properly. You're slipping and sliding all over the place. I'm interested to see that. Overall, though, I'm laying the points here, and Shanahan, I'm watching you, Shanahan. I'll say that much. This is like, because the other part about Dan Campbell, right? That I think the speed he's going at.
Yeah.
If you know what I'm saying, right? Yeah. So that gives you also the ability to game plan for that stuff too. And I feel like that's the part I'm going to be really interested to see, because Shanahan at this point too, you have to win this game, right? Like, I'm talking about Shanahan era, Lynch era. Like, you've put your chips in the table. You're here. You're against the Lions, who you're, for lack of a better term, you're better than. right? Like, I just feel like this is your
further
timing.
along. Yeah. Yes.
You're further along. Yes. Yeah. And also, as you mentioned, like, if this isn't the year that you at least get back to the Super Bowl, like, how many more chances are you going to have keeping this team together? Is Brock Purdy like really, really your guy for the future? You know what I mean? Like, all of these things, as your team is currently situated with your offense, with all these weapons, with like the ages of some of these guys too, right? So this has to be your everything right here if you're Shanahan. Like, there's no messing around here is what I'm saying.
Right, which is all like the case for them to win the game. It's none of it
totally.
necessarily
I'm talking about win.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? And it's like, it'd be a perfect, sort of conceptually, it'd be perfect teaser leg. There's just no other thing to tease it with. Right? We're just running around looking for second legs, and we don't have a second leg for this, right?
For sure. No, and definitely.
So, we'd be remiss if we didn't mention, right? Like, the Detroit Lions offensive line is arguably the best in the league. And if Chase Young isn't out there doing anything, and they're getting gashed to the point of like 5 yards per carry by Aaron Jones last week, like, is David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs something you might be interested in, right? Like, it's like, no, I don't want that if I'm the 49ers, because it's like, we know what the Bosa's do, right? Like, it's pass rush. Like, maybe I'll consider, stopping the run. And we know what Chase Young does, and it's not even the pass rush, and it's not the run, right? Like, he's not
even. You can see what the Packers did last week, where they were chipping the edge every single time, getting the edge for their running back last week, which was, obviously great game planning. I'm sure the Lions are watching that and saying, this might be a thing for our 2 stud running backs.
Yeah. And so listen, I gave you sort of the caveat as far as like, this, that, or whatever, as far as, if it goes to 6.5, 7.5, whatever, but like at 7, like, honestly, I would just take the Lions, like, if nothing changes, because again, like, we're asking in the NFC title game, which, like, it's easy to be like, oh, the Lions, like, they've never been here before, haven't been here in like a lot of people's lifetimes. Like, this isn't going to be. The reason I started talking about the idea that like the NFC North and the Lions in general are going to be sort of a problem going forward is there's a reasonable sort of, argument to be made that like 3 years from now, 1 year from now, we're looking back at this and going, can you believe we got 7 points with this Lions team? And by the way, can you believe the Lions are so good for the last 3-4 years? Whichever time frame we end up sort of going back and having this conversation, based on the way they draft and the way they build their roster and all of this stuff. It's like, man, we might look back on this and being like, I can't believe we didn't take +7 in an NFC title game, which, like, if you make it to the conference championship, like, fluke season is over, right? Like, there are no Steelers, there are no Texans, there are no Bucks. Honestly, even the Bucks. I was going to say the Packers, but I felt even kind of, mean about even using the Packers, because listen, they could have been in this game, with just a couple of, I don't know, safety catching a pass, hitting him right in the chest, for example, or a kicker making a kick. So yeah, it's just like, I just don't want to have to ask the 4. And listen, they could win this game by 3 touchdowns. The ball bounces a certain way, right? Like, we know that going in. But like, the people who don't care for Brock Purdy, they will cite the amount of turnover-worthy throws that he makes that he has gotten away with in his early career. And we talked about sample size when we started this conversation. And it's like, if he keeps making these throws, these guys are going to these opponents are going to catch these balls at a higher percentage to sort of level off, get to sort of an average level of turnover rate, which he should probably be sort of headed for here, right? And like, horseshoes, prayers, whatever you sort of want to, associate it with, like, he got away with one last week, and he gets away with it a lot, right? And that's in the numbers as far as turnover-worthy throws that actually get converted into turnovers. And it's just like, if that's sitting there lurking at any given moment, and you have obviously the sort of aggression versus like conservatism, approach from each side, it's just like, I can't lay 7 points with that. I just can't.
No, I totally got you. Totally understand. It will be fun for sure. But of course, before that game on Sunday, we have the Chiefs at the Ravens. And this, is getting all the headlines, obviously, because you got the 2 star QBs in terms of the soon to be 2-time MVP, Lamar Jackson, and Patrick Mahomes, who is still Patrick Mahomes. I like this matchup. This matchup is going to be great. But I also think that, it's more for me anyways, how I'm trying to like figure this game out is based on the defenses, right? And like whose defense has a better chance of slowing down the other guy. And I say slowing down because really I think it'll come down to holding someone from a touchdown to a field goal, right? Like that's how I'm looking at this.
Okay.
Ravens favored by 3.5 points, and getting the extra half point. It's like, I got to take the Chiefs here. I just think that the tough thing about this, right, is that Patrick Mahomes, I've had this thing and it sounds way too simplistic, but when you're telling me I'm getting points with Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs, it's like I kind of trust him to keep it somewhat within reason. Like still one of the greatest performances we've probably seen from Mahomes was when they lost the Super Bowl to the Bucks and my guy had no O-line. He's running for his life. They lost, but you're sitting there watching like, okay, this guy is like, he's it. He is that dude. I get Lamar might be that guy, but I got to see it. I need to see it in this. Get past Mahomes, get to the championship. Whereas Mahomes just like that game against the Bills. I can't lie to you. I'm gonna get deep into gambling here with you here for a second.
Okay.
Well, I was watching that game. I had a lot of different, I had Chiefs plus the points. I had Chiefs money line. I had some parlays with the Lions, a lot of Chiefs action, we'll say.
Yeah.
And there were some points where I'm watching that game and I'm thinking, do I cash this out? Because the Bills seem to be getting all of these breaks right now, right? Like pick one, whether it was Coleman or Mecole Hardman, Mecole Hardman, fumbling on the goal line, Josh Allen's fumbles getting recovered, like Josh Allen just playing supreme hero ball. Like I'm just like, this looks like the Bills are going to do this. And I almost cashed out.
Yeah.
Almost.
Oh.
I was like, you know what? Let's just let this ride.
Yeah, never cashed out.
And it was Mahomes. No, but the thing was Mahomes was just like, not that he made it look easy, but their offense was just scoring way too easily.
Right.
And it was just like, okay, I have to trust this guy. And ultimately, I mean, he made the plays that his team needed him to make. Josh Allen just came up a little short. Stephon Diggs came up big short.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Man, yeah, we could do a while before
we could do a lot. We could do a lot there. Yeah. But my point overall is just like when I'm watching, the QB matchup and it's like hero ball needed from Josh Allen to make that game what it was. Hero ball, we're going to see it from Lamar Jackson in this one. And it's just like Mahomes, just whatever you need me to do, I'm able to do. And I trust in that guy. And I'm getting 3.5 points.
Yeah.
It's a long way to go, but I'm just saying 3.5. I think I'm going to take that like every time with Patrick Mahomes. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah. I mean, I would make the case that like, if you think you're sort of singular in that attitude,
no, I definitely don't.
You know what I mean? Like, people are on that vibe. People are on that vibe. Like, I think 3.5 with Patrick Mahomes. Like,
I feel though that like a lot more people are on like the Ravens. Like this is just their time. They're like one of the greatest teams. Like they're just this unstoppable force machine. Like I feel like I'm hearing that more.
I don't. I mean, listen. I don't know. Like, listen. Everybody hears different things. You're watching different things. Sometimes it's within the context of betting. Sometimes it's not. Right. And obviously, like you're referencing you're referencing the hook, right? You're referencing that you're getting plus 3.5. Yes. So like the Ravens could win this game and have all of those sort of Ravens dockers be sort of correct, and you still win your bet, right? Like, so it's sort of hard to kind of like parse through it all, but like. The easiest thing to say, the easiest case to make is like Patrick Mahomes plus 3.5. Like I'll take that every time. And like, what am I going to say? Like Patrick Mahomes isn't very good. Like he's amazing. Like, so I guess, well, okay. Let's start with the fact that if this game was played.
Can I ask you a question to start?
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Can I ask you a question to start?
Yeah, do it.
So if last week, right, the Bills were favored by 2.5.
Yeah.
At home to the Chiefs.
Yeah.
And then now this week, the Ravens are favored by 3.5.
Yeah.
I don't understand how the Ravens are viewed as this like historically great team and their 1 point difference between what the Bills line was. The Bills are not that team.
Okay. So there's a couple of things, right? So one, and I know, you were sort of saying this from like a media or sort of hearsay sort of standpoint. From a rating standpoint, which, we talk about with the 49ers being like up over the 80s out of 100, right? The Ravens aren't rated as historically great. They're rated about 77 out of 100, right? Which is like Super Bowl. Honestly, it's right where you'd be if you were the number one seed in a conference, right? It's probably where the 49ers should be from a rating standpoint, especially since, as you know, the Ravens did beat them in San Francisco earlier this season. So, and you go, okay, why is it a point? So with the rating that the Ravens have at 77 out of 100, the line, if this game was played, during the regular season, especially given obviously the struggles of the Chiefs, this line would be 4.
Okay.
So it's actually a little bit short relative to the regular season. You go, okay, like why is it a little bit short? Well, I don't know, the interest in people in betting on Patrick Mahomes plus the points. And, you mentioned and this is what we just talked about with regards to key numbers with 7. He's saying, well, it's just 1 point, but it's not just 1 point. It's the difference between 2.5 and 3.5. And so that's like what, 10, 12% of win probability shifting, hands there because of how frequently the Ravens or any team that's sort of favored around 3 wins by exactly 3. Right. So that's a big difference. That, 2.5 to 3.5 in the NFL is a massive difference from just a point spread victory, ATS win probability.
Mathematics. I got
you. Yeah, like if you go from win to loss with a 3-point game, with the favorite winning by 3, like you're taking 10 to 12% of win probability there. So like that. Yeah, so like that's going to be way more than sort of just the sort of 1 point. This isn't 5.5 to 6.5. It honestly isn't even 6.5 to 7.5. It is literally the most important cover, going across the key number, right? So that's so those are sort of the 2 things. So you've seen this line open 3, 3 again, like we said with the other game at 6.5, 7. This line, open 3 to 3.5, meaning like you have to pay if you want -3, you have to pay if you want +3.5. And over the course of the week, as the Ravens have gotten a better injury report, Mark Andrews, potentially Marlon Humphrey, right? Literally 2 of their best players on either side of the ball returning for this game. So the rich get richer type situation. That's why this number has come not just on to 3.5 sort of pure, but like is drifting now closer to 4, the number that we sort of project if this were a regular season game. And so as much as people like the idea of betting on Patrick Mahomes, like that's kind of the only case right now is sort of the idea of Mahomes magic. And so like that is going to manifest itself where everybody feels a lot better about the Chiefs after 2 games, because going into the playoffs and throughout the regular season, when they're losing home games to the Raiders, right? Everybody's like concerned about the Chiefs. Then they go and they play the Dolphins, who are just suffocated by the cold, right? And like, yeah, the Chiefs offense like worked in the cold, but it looked better because the other team's offense didn't work in the cold. And it was like, throw it to Kelsey, throw it to Rice. And then like, by the way, like, Vic Fangio gets fired. Right. So like there's some, there's a little bit of smoke and fire situation here, right? Like the indicator of like Mike Daniel didn't love the way that Vic Fangio, sort of had that defense going. And even with all the sort of injuries that they had, he still wasn't able to save his job. That's how little they thought of Fangio's general performance over the course, especially towards the end of the season. And then you go to Buffalo, and it's sort of easy to be like, well, this Buffalo team, and obviously you got Josh Allen and like the fake punt and like all of these sort of, hot button topics. And by the way, like to come back as a diva wide receiver, like how great is that job? Because you just get to MF your quarterback whenever the ball isn't perfectly placed, and when it is perfectly placed and you can't come down with it, which is basically almost every playoff game of Stephon Diggs' career, you just get to like, sort of tap your chest, and Josh Allen gets to sort of take a giant sigh, and he can't run over and yell at you for being an idiot who can't catch the ball, right? So like, as you would say,
and then you wonder why he didn't throw it to you on the check down, 3rd and 9 or whatever.
Totally.
Was it 3rd and 9 or 2nd and 9, whatever it was?
2nd and 9, which by the way, like you've got a guy wide open in the end zone, and like who else could have like done his job? Deion Dawkins could have not gotten absolutely barrel rolled by Chris Jones into Josh Allen that forced that throw to be 95% of the distance that Josh Allen expected it to be, because he had Chris Jones and Deion Dawkins like combined like 600 pounds of human being knocking his left side of his body. So like, sorry, he didn't hit the wide open receiver in the end zone for the game leading touchdown. And if you want to tell me that they would have scored too early, I'm sorry, man, I'm going to take the 4-point lead.
Of course.
I'm going to take the 4-point lead with 2 minutes left because you know what? Maybe the Chiefs take first of all, it isn't a situation where they can just, take the clock down and kick a field goal. It's they have to score a touchdown, which gets more complicated when it comes to the clock and whatnot. And by the way, the Chiefs may end up scoring too quickly in that situation, which might allow, as we saw 2 years ago, the Bills to go back down the field and score with, 13 seconds left. And in maybe that case, they actually squib the kick instead of just booting the ball and allowing the Chiefs to have decent enough field position to score on 2 plays. But we've gotten off track here a little bit. My point in all of this was going to be like, okay, why was it so easy for the Chiefs? And you go and you look at the Bills defense that, by the way, wasn't particularly great all season long. No. We always kind of chalk that up to defensive injuries. And I don't think that was unfair necessarily. But those things still piled up. They were playing AJ Klein in that game, who is not even on the team, essentially. He didn't play in he wasn't on the team in the regular season because they were 4 linebackers already injured, or he might have been their 4th guy. But there were 3 linebackers. And if you watch the key plays in that game, you know who's in the mix all the time? AJ Klein. You know what he's not doing? Tackling Travis Kelce on his touchdown or tackling Isaiah Pacheco as he's dragging humanity for an extra couple of yards.
I love that guy.
On essentially every run. And it's you know what? If AJ Klein plays for the Ravens this week, I'd probably like the Chiefs plus the points too. But you know who's playing for the Ravens this week? Roquan Smith and Patrick Queen are playing for the Ravens this week. It's not going to be as cozy of a situation for Pacheco to run the ball over and over and over again. I don't know. I think the Chiefs punt this week. They only punted 1 time last week. And by the way, their defense, their vaunted defense, didn't really stop the Bills. No. Right? At any point. They didn't give up any huge plays. There were no explosive plays of 20 plus yards, but it was a consistent, move the ball down the field situation. By the way, they would have given up an explosive play if Diggs had caught the ball, if Sherfield had caught the ball, right? It's just sometimes the guys have to make the catches. And when you're going up against a team like the Ravens, who are, they're not all explosive plays, but when they get those explosive plays, they make them work because it's Jackson, keeping the ball, getting free in the secondary. It's him finding, receivers open because everybody's paying such attention to Lamar Jackson. And you can say that the Chiefs had that same situation last week where they had to keep their eye on Josh Allen.
It's different.
Josh Allen's a problem because Josh Allen's going to run over your face. Mm-hmm. And Lamar Jackson's a problem because he might go 50 yards, right? If you're not, if you're too focused on the run game. And Chris Jones, Tony Romo mentioned it at halftime, and then Chris Jones said it at the end of the game, right? Their run defense for the Chiefs, we need to stop this run, is the first thing that Chris Jones said in the victory interview after the game. And it's is that the thing that you want to have to tighten up before you go face the Ravens, going up against a team with a quarterback who not only will keep it, especially come playoff time where he keeps it more and it's all that more dangerous, especially in the red zone. He went from 5 regular season rushing touchdowns to 2 in 1 game last week, right? He is going to keep it more, which is what all we've ever asked of Lamar Jackson, by the way, right?
For sure.
Just don't screw it. Don't fumble, don't get super loose with it, don't get injured, right? He did that during the regular season and it won him his 2nd MVP, or, looks like it's going to be the case. And no other quarterback opens up holes for his running backs the way that Lamar Jackson does. And so if you think Josh Allen had something to do with, the Bills being able to matriculate the ball on the ground all game long, wait till you see this, right? Mm-hmm. And by the way, you also have this Chiefs team that came in, coming in from 2 playoff games on, a regular rest, sort of 6 days of rest type day, against a Ravens team that, we just mentioned getting healthier, has played one real game in the last 4 weeks and has an extra day off going into this game. Mm-hmm. And by the way, is of course playing at home, right? And so it's I kind of get why this line is at least 3.5 too. And kind of feel like it should be closer to that 4 that we projected and maybe even higher because the circumstance for this game favors the Ravens so heavily, right? And, in the regular season, we talk about spots, teams that have played 2 or 3 straight road games, short week this, all of that, right? And it's that all just goes away because it's a playoff game and because Patrick Mahomes is involved. Patrick Mahomes, again, taking last week aside, I mentioned obviously the Bills' defensive issues, right? The issue going into that game, why they were underdogs, is because there was concern because Patrick Mahomes had never played a game away from home in the playoffs. Like he'll try to tell you that Super Bowl against Tampa Bay was away from home. By the way, they got smoked in that Super Bowl. But like, again, I don't want this to sound like I'm trying to like besmirch the great name of Patrick Mahomes. I think he's amazing. My point is like all of the things about him that have been amazing up until this point, all have come at home and then last week. Right. And it's like, I can punch holes in last week. And it isn't necessarily even about Mahomes. It's about a defense that I felt was disappointing when you and I talked about taking the Chiefs. And listen, we want to bet on the Chiefs. There's no reason for us to harbor ill will about the Chiefs. But like, we talked about how like we thought the defense for the Chiefs was going to be the difference last week. And it just like, it wasn't. It was the fact that Travis Kelce, call it whatever you want, like turning back the clock or being just wide, the Bills letting him be wide open, 20 whatever yards out. And not making the tackle by the goal line because they were starting a guy like who wasn't on the team 3 weeks ago at linebacker. Like none of that stuff applies to what the Chiefs are going to face this week. And so like, yeah, if the game is close, I get it. I would want Patrick Mahomes too. I don't know that this game's going to be close though.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting because I look at the way that the game against the Texans went and, really the Texans were lucky to have that game be a tie game at halftime, right?
Like it was in a short field, got them a field goal. Like that's
yeah. No, totally.
And a good offense, third in the league in yards per play. Like this wasn't some dredge like Steelers team who they just shut down. It was like rookie of the year, CJ Stroud, like a team that's cooking with gas.
Yeah, like I'll be very honest. Like I just think that the reason I'm on the Chiefs, and as I've said this, is just it's like I'm getting the 3.5 points, and I know how crazy that sounds or how like chalk that sounds, so to speak. I just like to sit there and enjoy and watch what's gonna happen in this game because like we're watching greatness. It's funny, you talking to people, and there's people who like I'm tired of the Chiefs. There's too much Mahomes and obviously the Taylor Swift stuff, which is like, really, do you care that much about seeing Taylor Swift cutaways? Like that really makes you mad? Yeah, like that really makes you that mad. Anyways, my point is there's so much talk about that. And it's like, sit back and appreciate the greatness of what we're going to watch right here. This is going to be a dope matchup. And that part's cool. And I just think that I see this game coming down like somehow, some way, this is going to be a close game. And I like my guy Spags. Spags got to be cooking something up. And I know that Lamar is beyond that, so to speak.
He's beyond cooking. Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But like, I love that challenge, right? I love that challenge for Andy Reid, for Mahomes, for like, no matter what, we've seen it time and time again where somehow, so they figure something out to keep it close.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know. I put it this way: like, if you like the Chiefs, like, just take the money line, because if this game is within 3 points, if they have hung in, or however you want to sort of frame it, like, and this game comes down to the last drive, I would want Patrick Mahomes too.
Sure.
I don't.
You might not get there.
I just don't think we're gonna get there. And there's a couple of a couple more points I want to make. One. The Chiefs were, I think, 6th or I'm going to mess this up, but let's say it was 6th in the league in first half scoring. They were 27th in the league in second half scoring this year. And like, by the way, like a lot of the scoring happened in the first half last week. If the Chiefs are going to do this, they got to do this. Like they got to go now. Right. And that's like a really tough thing to do. Like, even you're a road team, it's like, okay, let's just hang in. Let's hang in. The crowd will settle down in the second half. Like things will get tighter in the second half, and then we'll sort of push through. Like the first half is usually the problem, right? For a road team. And so like, that's kind of a bad mix there. And the Ravens you can say the Ravens sort of struggled in the first half last week, but again, they hadn't played a real game in 3 weeks, right? So like, if there was ever a half that you would want to kind of fade the Ravens conceptually, it was the first half of the first game. And again, by the way, it took a punt return touchdown, something that in the NFL these days almost never happens. It took that for that game to not be 10-3 or maybe even worse at the half. And so the other element is like, we just talked about, we're talking about Spags and the Chiefs. It's like, and I think you're sort of understanding it too. It's like, you can game plan for, the Peyton Mannings of the world and like certainly the CJ Strouds of the world and even the Josh Allens of the world. Like it's read and react on the field when it comes to Lamar Jackson, right? And it's making tackles, et cetera, et cetera. The Chiefs are probably going to end up here with 3 starters out. And so we just did this with the Bills, where it's like, if you start losing starters, things get problematic, right? So the Chiefs could be, without Nadi in the defensive tackle position, right? Sort of a run stuffer, which might be a guy who's important when you're getting Gus Edwards, in the face all game long, whenever Lamar doesn't decide to keep it.
Or Dalvin Cook all of a sudden.
What? Willie Gay, missed the game last week with a neck. I don't know that his neck. I got a sore neck right now. I don't know how long this is going to last. So I don't know that he's going to be like, all right, let's get into this game. And how long, if he plays, how long is that going to last? And then in Mike Edwards in the safety position, right? A position where that position is responsible for tackling Lamar if he happens to get the edge, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just go, okay, there's three potential injuries there. And by the way, go take a look at the snap counts from last week in that game against the Bills. Chiefs had 50 offensive snaps. The defense was on the field for over 70 snaps. I think it was 77 snaps.
It's insane.
So again, 77 snaps on a short week where it's just all right, and now you're dealing with this team who again is getting a key piece back. And by the way, you kind of don't know where you're getting, where you're getting it from when it comes, you mentioned Dalvin Cook, right? As a third running back. And he had some moments in that, obviously late in that game after Gus Edwards kind of got banged up and they didn't need him to sort of close that game out. But even the receivers, it's there's nobody who you're going to, you're tripping over to draft for your fantasy team next year. Maybe Zay Flowers in his second season, but Isaiah Likely is still going to get snaps. And that dude will he goes up and gets the ball. He is something of a problem. He is probably the best number 2 tight end in the league. And then Rashad Bateman's out here making plays. And it's I really wasn't ready for a big Rashad Bateman game. And Nelson Aguilar doesn't get any respect in the betting market. He had a touchdown for us last week at, plus 550. He's plus 650 to score this week. I mean, got to Odell Beckham, who had one catch for 12 yards last week. Just wasn't needed in all of this, nonsense. So it's man, there's just a lot of dudes, 3 running backs, 6 pass catchers. And it's best of luck trying to come up with a game plan to defend that. When you can go against the Bills and be you know what, we're going to try our luck here, making sure that Shakir doesn't beat us because we're going to double Stephon Diggs. You know what I mean? It's such a different game plan, right? And it's this isn't, Tom Brady, we need to pressure him up the middle. Let's load it all up. And we've got, by the way, a historically good defensive line and it's a Super Bowl and this, that, or whatever, right? These are the things that Spagnuolo has obviously kind of gotten his, I'm going to say it, his flowers for over the course of his career. But the Chiefs do lose sometimes, and sometimes they just go at home. And this is just this, you can say last week going on the road, this is the toughest situation of his career. It is so much more difficult this week based on all of the stuff that we've talked about. And Chiefs almost lost that game and almost, and the annoying part when that game was going back and forth, down, up 3, down 4, up 3, down 4, is you're this game is a coin flip game, but we're not even going to get a push on 3 because if the Bills win, they're going to win this game by 4 points. At least that was, right up until the point where they didn't convert, a first down and had to kick that late field goal. So this is, I'll put it this way, Patrick Mahomes' greatness is built on being great, but being great on neutral and home field. I don't think it required him to be great last week to win that game. I wasn't looking at that game going Patrick Mahomes is amazing. I was Patrick Mahomes is dicing, honestly, a suspect defense up, and which is what he's supposed to do. Yeah. It's going to take an outland. I'll say, I think it's going to take his best performance of his career.
I agree with you.
To win this game.
I've said earlier this week, just in conversations about this game, if Patrick Mahomes goes in and wins this game, he's the GOAT. And people are what? You can't say that. He doesn't have the championship. He doesn't have whatever. And it's I don't think you're understanding, going into Baltimore to win this game with this team, which I'll say this to close this, portion of me being on the Chiefs. The most funny part about it is that we had the MVS game last week where he caught the passes.
And that's, again, that's another thing where it's we're doing that a second straight week. That's going to happen again. It's just I don't, man. And it's worth mentioning, and I don't just mean this will be the greatest accomplishment of his career as far as winning a game that they shouldn't have won. That includes the coming Super Bowl if they do. The next game is easier than this.
Yeah, totally.
Neutral site against, and the point spreads will reflect that, but like neutral site against San Francisco, or God help us, Detroit.
Oh, for sure.
Right? Is so
but
much
it's like
in Vegas is so much easier than this game.
Yeah, I can't lie to you. I said from the beginning, there's no shame in my game. I'm very honest with where I'm at and where I'm lying. And if you're listening to this pod, you can tell I'm going to be on the Niners because I'm a Niners fan. I'm going to be on the Chiefs because I always been on the Chiefs.
And you said you're like, we're going to go out of order. We're going to talk about this. We're going to talk about the whatever game first and whatever. And then you're like, by now you guys know where I'm going with this. And I hadn't looked, or I don't know if the font was up. For a second there, I thought you were going to start with the Chiefs game because I was like, there is a better chance he likes the Chiefs plus 3.5 than he does his own team -7. You know what I mean? Like I see in the world like a way in which you're like, well, I like the 49ers to win. I'm going to be cheering for them, but like 7's too many points. And like, I like the Lions, but like, I was like, there's no way he's not taking the Chiefs in this game. Like it was 100 you were taking the Chiefs, and it was like 72 that you were going to take the 49ers.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I just want one request. I have one request from Andy Reid. We don't need Mecole Hardman in this game. We just don't need it. It's not a thing. If he wants to run like laps, run suicides, get his cardio in, running to clear out DBs and clear out a safety. Cool. Well, we're with that. But he doesn't need any touches in this game. He really doesn't.
Totally.
I know I heard Bill Simmons say this, and normally you're like, oh, he's doing bit. But I sat there with my boy who could vouch for me when they handed the ball off to Mecole Hardman. I had that moment where I was like, yo, he's going to fucking fumble, isn't he? I just swore. But that's in the moment, I'm just like, why are we giving the ball to Mecole Hardman?
Source is you, but you were quoting a source. Yeah.
No, but I was just like, Pacheco is running with like his life on the line, like carrying the squad on his back. You're on the goal line. It's like, you know what we're gonna do? Here you go, Mecole Hardman. You've already fumbled once in this game. Why not give it on the goal line? Like, what is
outrageous? And honestly, like, okay, and if you want to, again, listen, we want the cool thing about going 4-0 against the spread, 1 week is like you have a very sort of clear eye about everything, where you don't have sort of like you're not harboring anything, but like. Andy Reid, same kind of deal with Shanahan, only like almost like the dead, opposite, where it's like, why do we got to get so loose? You know what I mean? And like one person I think got the joke, but I was like, why run a jet sweep with Mecole Hardman when you can just run the option with Blake Bell and Clyde Edwards-Helaire, right? Because like that's the type of like dumb thing where it's like, let's snap it to Blake Bell and have him run the option to the right where he flips it to like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They'll never see that coming, and it's like, you mentioned Pacheco, but it's like, by the way, like Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce, like you got other options here, man. We don't need a jet sweep with Mecole Hardman, who've already fumbled earlier in this game. Like, what are we doing? And so it's just like, okay, man, I don't. Andy Reid, it's been 20 years, and of course he's got the Super Bowl, and as we've talked about a million times with regards to getting, Nick Sirianni got to a Super Bowl, cool. Oh, this guy like won a Super Bowl, cool. It's just like, that's the cool part about the football season. Like they're so short. They're like the sample size is so small that guys can get to and win, in this case, like multiple Super Bowls, and you still end up going like same old Andy Reid, right? Like not knowing how to use timeouts, not challenging things correctly. And in this iteration of Andy Reid, because like that was Andy Reid's like thing when he was going to NFC title games every year with the Eagles, where it's like, this guy has not figured out how timeouts, the clock, or challenges work. And like that's like literally the three most important. That's why we talk about Dan Campbell being potentially a better head coach, HC, than Kyle Shanahan, OC. So I just look and I go like, I don't want have to ask Kyle Shanahan to be aggressive, and I don't want to ask Andy Reid to not do something dumb from like a play calling or like unnecessary from a play calling perspective. So I mean, listen, it's a little bit different, obviously, because like Reid and like said, Mahomes obviously an underdog. They don't have to cover a big number. It's just like there are too many other matchups for me to sort of like. And again, if the Chiefs win this game, man, like I'm probably on them in the Super Bowl because right? Like damn.
Like, I think that's the point. Like, I'm just so like gaga over the fact of Mahomes. Like, you've lost 3 games in the playoffs in your career. One was the Super Bowl, the other is in overtime. Like, just what we're watching is what I'm saying is like.
But again, those teams were better.
those offenses were better.
Those offenses were definitely better.
Of course.
Okay.
Ask for the defense is better because it's against Lamar. But I'm saying the defense is better.
Yes. Defense right? But again, that's what we thought last week. And like didn't look so great against the Bills.
I honestly think Josh Allen, was on his best behavior. Josh Allen played really, 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 really well.
Josh Allen's awesome.
Like that touchdown he threw to Shakir was just like, wait, what? Like, how did that? I don't think we watch football a lot.
Yeah.
And there's things that happen that we just accept as normal. And it's like, no, you shouldn't be able to do that on the run with that velocity in that spot while dodging a D lineman that's about to sack you. And you get that much on the Josh Allen was incredible, right? So it's like Lamar is going to have to do the same.
That's the thing. I don't know but I don't know that that's true. I think the game is easier.
Why they play the game, and I love it.
I think the game is easier for Lamar this week than it was for Josh Allen last week because of the infrastructure and honestly, again, if the Chiefs win this game, it's a historically great, probably his best performance for Patrick Mahomes. If you want to say historic / best thing ever, and you're giving me a choice to bet on it or against it.
Yeah.
I'm going to bet against it, and I'm going to let the historically awesome thing beat me because the reason it's historically awesome is because it never happens.
Yes, that is
so it's okay, man, do it. Just do it. This isn't the biggest bet in the history of time, but there's 2 games left. One I've got a total on, which you can tell how locked in I'm, how into the point spread I am in that game. But I could eat how easy it is. I mean, go around, listen to other content providers, man. The people who don't put their stuff on paper every week that people can judge in black and white that still sit there in the score feed for weeks on end. You can go back and you want to calculate the record, you can do it, but tell you what, it's going to show up as 120 units to the good this season, right? Who else is doing that?
Yeah.
I could easily just say to you, Patrick Mahomes plus 3.5, he's getting points, blah, blah, blah. And when and if they don't cover that game, they lose by 7, 10, 15, 300. We could all just be oh, you know what? I got to take Patrick Mahomes, get points every time. And it's this easy, loss, right? And people make bets because the reverse is an easy loss to take. They don't blame themselves for the bet. They just go well, I have to make that bet every time, blah, blah, blah. So it's super easy to just be Kansas City plus 3.5 from my position. But I researched this stuff, man. I'm looking at this and every sign outside of Patrick Mahomes is amazing. Which again, a lot of that was built with, having Tyreek Hill available to him and a much better sort of, honestly, a much better season last year. They just weren't very good this season, relative to their standards. So this is, listen, the Chiefs are always going to be good. They're probably always going to win their division. Interesting that, Chargers bring Jim Harbaugh, and we'll see how sort of, if there's any kind of, guard changing there, but the AFC West certainly gets a lot more interesting. It's just there is some, writing on the wall, especially with Travis Kelce. I mean, 34 years old. If he and Jason retired together this offseason, would you be shocked?
Nope.
And if that opened the door to by the way, how many other awesome legendary quarterbacks that have we seen that have just been on teams that were mediocre after the sort of initial surge? Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady. Tom Brady did 2 laps of an initial surge and then a dip and then another surge and then another dip towards the end of this time with New England, right? A lot of these guys, it doesn't have to be 13-3 every season. It doesn't mean that Patrick Mahomes is any less great, right? But when the roster around you,
shuffling,
specifically on offense, starts to dip, and maybe they got one with Rashee Rice, and maybe that turns into sort of a top 5 receiver type situation for him. But again, we got a tight end that's 34 years old that took him 8 weeks before he caught a touchdown. There's only so many years left, and it might be 0. It might be 1 for Kelce, right? If you tell me he's on the team 2 years from now, so the Ravens, speaking of, they're on the, this is the start of their time. This might be the end of the Chiefs' time. Whereas the 49ers might be in the middle of their time and the very start of the Lions' time. If that makes, some sense.
Yeah, no, I'm excited for both of these games. And Yeah, I'm
I heard
ready to watch both of these games. Like, I wish it was right now.
Yeah, I heard people saying like it sucks that the Chiefs and the Ravens are the first game, as if like we're that sort of mentally, incompetent that we can't like the better game has to be last because we can't possibly get ourselves up for the NFC Championship game late. It's like, I'm sorry, what was your alternative? They were going to start this, the game in Santa Clara at 3:00 Eastern. They're going to start it at noon.
But also like, why does that even matter? Yeah,
well,
it's not like I also don't think like the
Niners
Lions game is going to be trash.
No, I'm kind of more interested in that game than I am like this game. Like, I mean, I'm sort of hoping, to be honest with you, that it's closer than this game is. But like, I get from a branding perspective, like why people would be more interested in this game. But it's like, I kind of think both are awesome. And, as much as I say like 7 is a really good point spread in that, in the 49ers Lions game, it's like, wouldn't be crazy if that game was more entertaining than Chiefs Ravens. Because honestly, I think it's going to be a pretty low scoring game between the Chiefs and Ravens.
Yeah, no, can't wait for this one. Can't wait for Sunday it can't just be here fast enough. So it will be super interesting to see what will happen. And we will obviously be back next week. Wait, no, we won't be back next week.
Yeah.
2 weeks.
I could I could come live from Cancun and we could have a just a chat. Just a chat on the pod.
Enjoy Cancun.
Just talking about life. But no, I'm not.
Lay out. Enjoy Cancun.
Yeah, I'm not dialing in. Sorry.
Enjoy that.
Well, we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Yeah. But I mean, in between now and then, where can the good people find you, my dude?
Yeah, well, I mean, literally in Cancun watching the AFC and NFC Championship game on Sunday.
But they can't find you there.
Well, they'll find me at, well, they could if they were weirdos. They might be.
Leave that one alone, man.
Yeah, well, my point was, I believe they had, last I checked, they had the internet there. So, we're going to be celebrating and commiserating on Sunday, nevertheless. On Twitter at MRossAuthentic. And of course, everything that I write at The Score. We've got 2 separate articles for each game. Got so many thoughts about the games in general, as you've heard from this hour-long podcast, that they had to be separated from a prop, anytime touchdown, etc. article for each game. So 4 articles this week, AFC and NFC Championship preview, and then AFC and NFC Championship game props. And then, of course, because again, we're not going to talk between now and then, just everything you'd ever want out of the Super Bowl week, not next week, but the week after. I think I'm on the hook for 8 different Super Bowl prop betting and best bet articles. At least I think that's on my schedule. So yeah, plenty of content over at The Score under the bet tab in the news section over at The Score.
Sounds awesome, my dude. And you can find me on the app formerly known as Twitter at Shell Alexander, and on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander, where I will just be hoping that we can get one more week of MVS making catches. Maybe Tony is healthy again and maybe he can make up and make one catch this weekend for Patrick Mahomes this season. And, then they scrap that in the Super Bowl against the Niners and everybody's happy, or at least I'm happy.
Yeah.
One more week of Chiefs catches and then that's it, right? No, yeah. Everyone goes home happy. Yeah, sure. Sounds good.
Best of luck.
One can hope, right? One can hope. I'll say this. And I'm being honest. I'm not even doing like bit right here. The Super Bowl that everyone always anticipates rarely happens in terms of like the Niners and Ravens making it. So I'm saying, hold on, follow me for a second.
Eagles, Chiefs.
Follow me for a second. I just feel like one of these teams can lose. And I'm saying that I'm saying that knowing that like there's a probability that I'm leaning more on my team losing. Like I know that and I'm aware of that as I say it. So we will be back in 2 weeks to discuss that because, I might need a week to recover if that makes sense. But yeah.
As will I.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning into the pod. Thank you for liking and subscribing. Wherever you get this pod, continue to send in your comments and questions to us on socials, all that fun stuff. Let us know who you got this weekend and why you think I'm wrong about so much. I appreciate that. I really do. I enjoy it. No. I enjoy the feedback. I like it. And as I always say, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is the Clutch Picks Sports Betting Podcast. Coming to you every week, as always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.